Okay, we are now recording. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to the Federal Fiscal Year 2017 LSTA Final Evaluation webinar. And my name is Sue Lynn, and I'm the LSTA coordinator, and we'll get started. So the first, here's our agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about the LSTA State Program Report, which is the thing that I submit to IMLS. And the new framework, it's relatively new. It's actually about 5 years old now, but it's called the Measuring Success Framework. If you've been doing LSTA for a while, you've noticed everything sort of got reconstructed with new sections and new worksheets and new surveys, and that's all part of the Measuring Success. IMLS had all of this data, and it was really difficult for them to make connections and see patterns. It was just all of this narrative. So maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they pretty much took the LSTA programs and broke them apart to see all of the essential elements and recombined them and restructured them into this framework. We're going to talk about how measuring success and your final evaluation mesh up. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Searchable State Program Report database. If you haven't already seen it, you should take a look at it, and I'll give you the link. And then we're going to get to final evaluation best practices as recommended by IMLS to me and every other LSTA coordinator in the country. These are things that they noticed were maybe lacking in previous years, and they'd like us to their best practices. Okay, next up, next slide. Oh, any questions? Okay. Here is a visual. It's an infographic. I like visuals. If we were to take the state program report and turn it into a map, this is what it would look like. You can see this is the actual framework. The LSTA award, so that would be like Nevada. All these little projects are your subgrants. Then you can see the intent. Those were new for this framework. Each project is broken up into activities, and all the activities have different modes and different quantities and partners and beneficiaries and locales and formats and all of that. So this is a big overview of the framework. And then if we dial down one level, this is pretty much your final evaluation. If we turned your final evaluation into a map, it would look like this. There's your project, all of the different sections, the general information, that's the summary, project director information, that's you, your budget, your outcomes, additional information, those are all the photos and plans and websites that you attach that don't fit into any of these other categories but go into additional information. That's all on the left side, and then on the right side there are the activities. Those activities have been sliced and diced into 4 different buckets: instruction, content, planning, and procurement. And then you can see they're further sliced apart into, this one is content. You can do content acquisition, creation, preservation, lending, and description. So when you do your project and you have content, you buy books, that is content acquisition. If you you have a collection and you need to add some metadata to it, that's content description. If you take that collection and you digitize it, that's content creation. Digital. If you preserve it, it's content preservation, physical or digital. All right, so does that make sense? You're going to take all of your, if you've looked at the final evaluation, you probably already know what I'm talking about, but this is just a visual overview of the sections. And all of these little bubbles that that are on the screen here, these are, they're facets, right? They're the fields. These are searchable fields in IMLS's measuring success framework. Does that make sense? Okay. So, why is this important? Okay, it is important because your final evaluations, which follow this framework right here, you give to me, I compile them, I do a little bit of editing, but not much. I compile them and I submit them to IMLS. IMLS does a little bit of editing. They come back to me, they ask for clarification, they ask me to redo a few things, and then they take all of that and they put it into this brand new state program report database. And that database is made up of all your final evaluations, not just yours, but every single state, every single entity that receives LSTA money, their final program reports are in this database. And what do I want to say about that? This is important because, it's no longer just me who sees your final evaluations and maybe Jeff Kintop and Tammy. It's no longer just the IMLS program officer who sees it. This makes your projects open and searchable to the entire country. So that's why we're having this webinar, because we need to know how to report things properly, not properly, but just accurately, so that it's uniform, and when other people look at it, they'll know what on earth we're talking about, right? Any questions? Okay. Here is a screenshot of the user interface for the new SPR database. It's pretty simple. Search all fields. You can select a date and you can select a state. And the URL is right up there. So on this next page, so I typed in lifelong learning 2016 and I left it open to all of the states in the country. And right here, this is the result. There were 323 lifelong learning projects done in 2016, totaling $33,621,000. And if you want, you can go in and look at every single lifelong learning project. Montana, the State Library of Montana actually had a project called Lifelong Learning, so did the State Library of Virginia. But any of you who chose lifelong learning as an intent, or had that in your title, or somewhere in one of the searchable fields, your project will pop up. Okay. This next slide, I just redid the search, lifelong learning Nevada 2016, and there were 5 results. It's not perfect. It relies upon keywords and intents. So if you think your project was lifelong learning and it doesn't show up on this, it might show up under another searchable function. But under flat out lifelong learning intents and focuses, we had 5 in Nevada. And those totaled $764,000. When it shows matching funds, we're going to get to this later, but your local match will not show up in this public database. That's detail that is not viewable by the public. I guess that's local information, and it's got some identifiers, so they didn't put that in the database. They only put state match, so that's why it shows 210 in matching funds. That's actually our state bookmobile funding. That's match. Okay. So, yes, why is this important? This SPR searchable database, which IMLS calls the public view, expands the potential audience of state program report material. So as I said, all of your final evaluations, it's no longer just IMLS, but everyone in the library field can see it, and everyone in the general public, including our elected officials, can see it. So consider this when you're writing your final evaluation, and I definitely need to consider this when I'm going over your final reports and I'm uploading it into the Nevada State Program Report. We don't want to put people's names. We don't want to be overly critical of certain things. Well, unless you want that in the public domain, but just consider who your audience is when you're writing your final evaluation. Okay. So That brings me to actually the best practices for the final evaluation. This is new to all of us. It definitely was new to me last year and new to you last year. And I wasn't really sure, how this all worked and how everything fit together. IMLS has given me some guidelines, which I'm now sharing with you. When you write your final evaluation, you want narrative cohesion. So I think I've said that each little section should be a standalone paragraph. I should be able to read your activities and not be confused. It should be like its own little standalone paragraph. But it should also kind of tie into every other section. So in your summary and your outcomes, it's nice to cover all of the components of your report. In your budget, if you, in your activities, you describe buying some books, there should be a corresponding budget line item. If in your activities worksheets you say you did instructional programs and that was in kind, be sure to mention that in your budget as an in-kind match. There should be this whole, each of the sections of each of those searchable fields, they should all kind of blend happily together, right? And then in your budget also, if you have general purpose things, if you bought paper, you can definitely say that you bought paper, but explain how that paper furthered the project's outcomes. You printed things with it, or you used it for story times or something like that. So narrative cohesion is a very important thing to remember when you're doing your final evaluation. All right, any questions? Any comments? Okay, does that make sense? Yes? Okay, thank you. Next up. Oh, here we have an example. This example is from UNLV, their project from 2016, the African American Experience. They did a documentary. I'm using this as an example because IMLS used it as an example. We have an LSTA meeting, LSTA coordinators meeting every year, and they were walking us through, best practices, and they called this out as an example of a really good project summary. And I'm not saying this to say, you're thinking UNLV, they're experts, they've got tons of people on their grants. Absolutely. And we should take advantage of their expertise, right? We are all part of the same Nevada library community, and they have people devoted to who specialize in grant writing. And I don't know if this is true, I'm just talking, but we should take our subject matter experts and we should learn from them. And me as well. This is a really good summary, and when I write my own summaries for statewide projects, I'm going to refer to this definitely. Right, so in this summary, they kind of touch on everything. They've got, anyway, I'll let you read it, but any questions about this? Okay. Here is an example from UNLV of their outcomes and lessons learned. And this is actually rather really good because you can see they put their URL for their documentary that they created. They embedded it directly into the outcomes. So anyone looking at this project will have a clickable link and they can go directly to it. Also in here, they wanted to point out there are project-wide outcomes and impacts and applicable findings and lessons learned. And this is also something IMLS and I think are very important. We do projects and we can learn from each other. And if they are saying we did this, it was great, but we had this little glitch here, you can factor that in. So sharing your positive experiences is good, but also sharing with us all the little obstacles and challenges, that is greatly helpful for the entire United States library community. So please put lessons learned. and findings. Okay, any other questions about that? Okay, the next section is an example of content creation. UNLV created a documentary. If you read this, you will notice that all of the partners are listed, and this is something that I did. There's no set place in the IMLS State Program Report to put partners. So even though I have a separate section on the final evaluation asking you to list your partners, I sort of have the leeway to plug those partners into applicable sections. And you can do this as well. You can list your partners separately, but if you want to call them out in a specific space, such as a specific activity, you can do that. On the bottom, you can see it's content creation and the format is digital. They digitized one item. They digitized and made available to the public 2 things. And then these 2 things you'll find in the activity narrative. They had one physical item, and that's also listed up there in the narrative. So there's that narrative cohesion again. Okay. Okay. So sometimes it's hard to decide what activities go where. You know you've done this thing, but is it procurement? Is it content? Is it instruction? Is it planning? You might have called me and asked me, and I had to ponder it because I wasn't very sure. So this little slide here is to say sometimes things aren't what they seem. So this is especially true of procurement. Procurement is specifically for institutional capacity. If you bought iPads for a program, for an instructional program, they're not a procurement activity. They would be listed under your instructional activity. If you bought these automated material handlers, those help improve your library's physical and technological infrastructure. So that would be procurement. If in doubt, you can ask me, and if I don't know, I will ask my IMLS program officer, and we will figure out the proper place for your activity. Okay, does that make sense? The activities were difficult last year, I thought. Activities are meant to totally represent your project, but they're not meant to get into too much like little minutia detail. The rule of thumb is if it takes up at least 10% of your time and your resources, it's an activity. If you want to call it out and have it, bring attention to it, it's an activity. If it's just buying paper, that's not really an activity because it supports other things that you've done. Yeah, this one was a tough one, and at my LSTA coordinators meeting, we spent about an hour going through different scenarios on what's an activity and how to group them. So I didn't want to do that here. Instead, I figure since we have 10 people here and anyone has questions about how to report an activity, you can type them in chat or take the mic, and maybe we can do a group discussion on the best type of activity. This is I wasn't sure if this would work, this little brainstorming thing, but if anyone wants to ask a question or throw something out there, we can. Anybody? Okay. Oh my gosh, you guys are all experts. I'm so glad. Okay. All right. Well, this webinar is going really, really quickly, huh? All right. Next up is budget details. So the budget you tell me how much you spend in each budget category, and then in each category you put more detail, you put descriptions, not just I bought a bunch of equipment, I paid the copier lease, and we got access to this database, and we had 5 FTE staff on this project, or we hired, 1 temporary person at 0.25 FTE. So put that detail, and the reason we do that, it helps me and it helps my IMLS program officer determine if the costs are reasonable, and it helps us determine if they're allowable. So again, no food, no giveaways. So don't put as your description, we gave honorariums to these speakers. They're not honorariums. You're paying speakers for their time, so they're speaker fees. Don't say we did trustee training so that trustee trainings would so that our trustees would know how to advocate for us. You did trustee training so they would know their roles and responsibilities and of helping the library director run the library properly. Things in the budget detail, as I mentioned, they're not in the searchable SPR public view database, but they are FOIA, Freedom of Information Act-able. So if somebody decides they want to know exactly what was in your budget, they can do a FOIA and get that. So because this is public money, everything we do is public record. In the budget, you should describe your match too. If you had in-kind for staff, in-kind for volunteers, please put that in there. Okay. Next section of the final evaluation, additional materials. So these additional materials don't show up in the database. They are for IMLS's records. Photos, photo releases, plans, evaluation, these all go in their records. But unless there's a link in any of those narrative sections, they won't show up. So if you have a video that you would like people to see, put it in one of your narratives, put it in the activity or the summary. If you have created web pages that you're very, very, very proud of, and put them in one of the narratives. Definitely, I put them in the additional materials too, but they won't appear searchable unless you want them to. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you look right here, I don't know if you can see it. It says final evaluation example. I just PDF'd that UNLV African American experience final evaluation. I just PDF'd it and I put it up. Well, it was a PDF. I just put the PDF up there so you could look at it, so you can get an idea of, it helps me. If I have to do a brand new thing and I'm not sure what I'm doing, it really helps to look at an example. So there's an example. If you want to know what other people did, how other people described their projects, please, please, please look at that SPR database. It will, I think, prove really an invaluable resource to help you maybe determine how to report certain activities or how to describe lessons learned. Okay. Oh, and the link right there for the UNLV final evaluation PDF. It's that link on the very bottom. Okay, where is all this? It is all on the LibGuide. Here's the screenshot from today. This is exactly what it looks like. So there's the evaluation, the instructions, the example, and then all the activity worksheets. The worksheets are separate since I couldn't figure out how to get them into a single evaluation form, since you all have your own individual projects with so many different activities. It just seemed easier to create separate activity worksheets. So they're separate, just attach them. And Also, certain things have required surveys. So if you have an instructional program for the public, compile your survey results right there. If you've compiled them in project outcomes from PLA, just let me know and then I can pull those directly from there. The link is at the bottom, NSLA LibGuide Statewide Programs 2017 Competitive. 2017 is structured differently than 2018, so I wasn't quite sure how to manage things in 2017, so that's why it's structured differently. In 2018, all of this stuff will be under Manage Your Grant. And this archived webinar will be posted here as well. Okay. Wow, we're just cruising right through. The final evaluation is due October 1st, 2018, so you've got some time. Got some time to sit back and think and ponder everything that you did and figure out how to structure it. If you want, you can send it in right now. I already have a couple finals, but you have until October 1st to get all this stuff to me. And please send it to this MSLA PR LSTA at admin.nv.gov, because that goes to me and it goes to 3 other people, so it will not get lost. And then keep all of these originals. The records retention for this particular grant, the federal fiscal year 2017 grants, is until December 31st, 2021. And that's what I got. Most of you, I think, have done final evaluations before, so it's not looking too new. I think the only new thing is the SPR, the searchable SPR. If you haven't, give me a call if you have any questions. That's all I got for you guys. There is my contact information, my phone number, and my email. And here's our surveys, the required surveys by IMLS for instructional programs for library staff. I would appreciate it if you would take the survey so I will know if what kind of training and webinars I need to do for LSTA in the future. It does help. It does help greatly. So that's it. Any questions? I see 0 questions. Okay, we're done. Thank you. Thank you for attending.